it just feels unfair, really. Friends, I'm here to tell you this morning that Easter is a big deal. Now, I say that because this morning you are going to be joined by approximately 163 million of your closest friends in America in an Easter celebration of one sort or another today. Easter is the #1 church attendance day of the year, even more popular, even more well attended than Christmas Eve. In fact, today on planet Earth, more people will hear about the surprising, amazing resurrection of Jesus Christ than watch this year's Super Bowl, the entire World Series, every single game, and the season premiere of the Game of Thrones, combined by a huge margin. Easter is a big deal. And it's not just the single most important faith event in America. Easter is also an important social and economic driver as well. According to the website 2019 Easter Facts and Statistics, in America this year, $5.7 billion will be spent on food for today. No wonder we're fat. $3.3 billion will be spent on new outfits for today. $5.4 billion will be spent on gifts and candy, including 91 million chocolate Easter bunny, 89% of which will be eaten ears first. 90% of parents, and I think this was a good one, 90% of parents plan to speak to their children about eating candy in moderation today. And 81% of those parents who plan that moderation talk plan to snitch candy from their children's Easter baskets. Easter is a big deal. It's important it's an important event on many, many levels, both sacred and secular. Now, if my math is correct, and that is not a given on any day, today's Easter message at Cheney United Methodist Church will be her 139th Easter sermon shared. No, Alyssa was not here for the first one. But that is a pretty impressive run for a church in the modern era. I confess that I did not investigate deeply enough to find out how many pastors have served in this fine church in all those years, but I do know that preaching the Easter message was likely a very big deal for every single one of those pastors. Now, granted, most pastors don't get out much. And I confess that excitement in our lives is often lacking. But preaching the Easter message is the clergy version of being the starting quarterback in the Super Bowl, or the starting pitcher in the final game of the World Series. Or preaching the Easter message is bigger than being an actor in the final season of the Game of Thrones. Not better paid, but a bigger deal, at least to pastors. And speaking as your preacher this morning, it doesn't matter how many Easter sermons you've preached. This one, this morning, is the most important Easter sermon I will ever preach. Because Easter's a big deal. Easter matters. Now, details and survey numbers aside, I confess that I believe in Easter. Easter defines me, and the choices I make on how to live out my life and my faith, and it even influences how I interact with you. I believe in Easter. And I know that Christ's example of really living life to the fullest and sacrificing for others still matters in the world today. But before we get into that, let's take a moment to be in prayer together. Gracious and loving God, we are so grateful to be in this place this morning on Easter Sunday and share the joy and the celebration of the resurrection and the promise of that empty tomb that death is not our final destination. Life is. Eternal life is. Now, we know that if we're going to get everything we need to get out of this message this morning, we need to be open to it. So I pray that you send a spirit this morning to open our hearts and our minds and our ears this morning to the word that you have for us this day. And I pray that I can find a way to get out of the way so that it's your words to your people coming through and not mine. Amen. During the season of Lent, like most pastors I know, I read just about every Lenten article, sermon, or devotional reading that I can get my hands on, regardless of who wrote it or when it was written. Now, I will say that I agree with or I even finish all of them, but from the perspective of professional curiosity, I like to see how the other people of faith view this season of prayer and self-examination. A season that wraps up with the week of Passion. An intense week that rapidly shifts gears from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. Good Friday tells us that no matter who we are, death is a stark and sometimes brutal reality. But then just 2 short days later, on Easter morning, we're reminded that though death comes to each of us, it's not the last step. It's just the next one. Now, speaking of Lenten readings. Okay. I read all these Lenten things so I can find really good illustrations to share with you for the sermon. So recently I was reading one from Pastor Leonard Sweet, a great devotional. And I liked it so much that I included a couple of his illustrations in our message this morning. He started his article saying that Easter is all about a 4-letter word, and Christians are full of it. Now that got my attention. Well, he said at least we're supposed to be full of it. And the 4-letter word to which he was referring is life. What were you thinking of? Come on. Don't say it. Don't say it. As people of faith, you and I are supposed to be full of new life. Whole life, abundant, redeemed, and resurrected life. Easter declares that the purpose of life is not dying, and it never has been. The purpose of life is to really live a life so full of living and loving that it transcends death forever. Is that what you do? Friends, this morning I would suggest to you that celebrating Easter is quite possibly the greatest public service the church can perform to the world. Now, why would that be? Because it's the reality of Easter that makes everything else the church would do even possible. In the Gospel of John, Jesus' final words on the cross were, "It is finished." He spoke these words out loud. He shouted them out to his Father in heaven, but loud enough for the whole world to hear and know that his work on the cross was complete. It was done. Accomplished. And it was a warning to every evil force to start running, because though his sacrificial work on the cross was done, his salvation work was just getting started. When the soldiers taking Jesus' body down from the cross stabbed him with a spear point to make sure that he was really dead, Scripture says blood and water came out. That rush of bodily fluids revealed the final cause of death for Jesus, a burst aorta. Literally, Jesus died of a broken heart. The breaking of Jesus' heart was what finished Jesus' sacrifice for us. On Easter morning, the great surprise is that his sacrifice was not the end of his mission. Out of Jesus' broken heart, there came a new heart, a resurrected heart, an unbreakable, unstoppable, eternal heart that was just getting started. So on Easter, the words, "it is finished," becomes a boldly declarative, now it gets started. Now, friends, we have spent the past several weeks of Lent in a series titled "With All Your Heart." And this morning we confess that the life of every Christian begins anew with the resurrected rhythms of that Easter heart. For it's an Easter heart that the resurrected Jesus offered to you and to me and to all who believed in him, all who read the signs and symbols of new life that God had left in the empty tomb. When the beloved disciple saw the abandoned grave clothes, he believed that Jesus had risen. It was in that instant that his Easter heart started beating. It was when Mary Magdalene heard her name called with her beloved teacher's voice that she saw and believed that it was the risen Lord that stood before her. It was at that moment that Mary's Easter heart kicked in. Friends, is this church full this morning with people whose hearts are full of Easter? Do you have an Easter heart? And what would that even look like, anyway? An Easter heart is full of new life. It's full of new possibilities. An Easter church that's filled with Easter heart continues to offer signs of new life and new possibility and new hope for the world. A church with an Easter heart gets rid of the grave clothes. Have we shed our shrouds? Death shrouds separate the dead from the living. Death shrouds wrap a dead body in fine linens and sweet spices, but spices can't stop the inner decay of a dead heart. Instead of wrapping ourselves in grave clothes, a church full of Easter hearts puts on work clothes. An Easter heart church is metaphorically a blue jeans church. It lives its faith in everyday clothes that are tough and made to get dirty. Jeans get softer and more comfortable the more they are worn and washed. And in point of fact, maybe the very best jeans of all are the ones with the knees ripped out, and the blue is creased and whitened by years of constant use, like your faith. An Easter church is full of rock rollers. Now, I'm not saying rock and rollers. I said rock rollers. The first sign of the resurrection, as noted by a distraught Mary Magdalene, was that the rock had been rolled away from the tomb's entrance. See, everybody, even Jesus' resurrected body, needs to be offered a way out. Rock rollers offer ways out. Fresh starts, brand new beginnings to all sorts of people trapped in all kinds of tombs. Friends, strengthened by an Easter heart, we can roll away despair and reveal a path to hope. We can roll away delusions. Delusions like, if I was only rich, I'd be happy. Delusions like, all I need is one more drink or one more cigarette or one more high, and then I'll quit. Delusions like, the next promotion I get will give me everything I want. With an Easter heart, we can roll away fear and isolation and entice tomb dwellers to step out into the light. But rock rolling isn't a one-person job. It takes a community of Easter hearts like this one to get those rocks rolling in the right direction. A church with an Easter heart is always in a state of arrhythmia, always experiencing adrenaline surges, always skipping beats, and always has a racing pulse. An Easter heart is an arrhythmic heart because in an Easter heart church, the unexpected is always happening. Resurrection happens. Miracles happen. Truth happens. Goodness and beauty happen. And mostly we prove through the efforts and the care that we as a community of faith offer to others. We prove that Jesus is still happening. Like some of us in this room this morning. Thomas doubted the stories. Dead men, well, they don't come back to life, do they? He defied anyone to produce Jesus. He would only believe if he could put his fingers into the nail holes and spear wound. How many in this room this morning have echoed those same doubts? But then suddenly Jesus stood before him in that locked upper room, offering himself to be poked and prodded, flipping his whole concept of reality upside down. Thomas could only say, "My Lord and my God." If you have an Easter heart, you learn to expect the unexpected, to relish the ridiculous, to savor the sensational. An Easter heart is a church often filled with laughter, like this one. The resurrection is a testimony to the adage, "He who laughs last laughs best." The Sanhedrin, well, they thought they had the last laugh over this fake Messiah. The Roman authorities thought they had the last laugh by eliminating a troublemaker. The cruel crowds and the sadistic soldiers thought they had the last laugh when they mocked him on the cross. But the resurrection proved God always has the last laugh. Some German churches, for instance, have an interesting Easter custom that began during the Reformation period. An important part of the service is what is called the Easter laughter. The pastor will intentionally insert jokes into the Easter sermon because they believe that the church should ring with laughter on Easter Sunday, enjoying the fully divine sense of humor. And finally, and this may be the most important sign of an Easter heart, an Easter heart will be a broken heart. In Sweet's Easter devotional, I mentioned a few moments ago, he talked about a favorite tradition that he and his daughter Soren share. And I quote, "Since she was about 5, she and I have a ritual that is one of the joys of my life. Since I'm on the road quite a bit, I make it a practice to bring Soren home a heart from the places that I have visited. I tell her that she has my heart. And to symbolize that, I bring her back hearts made of every material and in every form imaginable to convey the love I have in my heart for her. These hearts remind her of the hold she has on her father's heart." One day when I was distributing the newest heart to her after a lengthy time away, Soren made me close my eyes. "I have a surprise for you," she said. "I made you a heart." He says, "When I opened my eyes to see what she had pressed in my hand, she squealed with delight, 'Here's my heart, Daddy.' And when I looked at her picture, my heart sank. Because in the middle of the picture was a giant heart, but it wasn't blood red, it was yellowish pink. And even more disturbing than its sickly look, the heart was breaking in two, torn and jagged from being ripped apart. But then he saw, coming out of the center of the broken heart, like a rising sun, there was a whole new heart. A throbbing, beet-red, strong heart being birthed from the pain of a broken heart." Now, I have to confess that after I read that, being somewhat soft-hearted myself, I thought about that for some time. I could not get that image out of my heart. And I came to the conclusion that this image is, at least for me, perhaps, the best illustration of the gospel that I have ever seen or read. Friends, the promise of Easter Sunday is not that your heart will break. In fact, the promise of Easter Sunday is that if you love at all, your heart heart absolutely will break. For God so loved the world that even God's heart broke. The cross hanging here in our chancel is a symbol of God's broken heart. A broken heart is the real price of love. Anyone here this morning have children? If you have a child, at some point, your heart will break. Anyone here have a significant other in your life? Too often the price of love is suffering. The price of love is a broken heart. But if Easter is not the symbol of a heart that will never break, it's the symbol of this. That out of that broken heart, God will birth in you a new heart, a whole heart. A beet red, blood-rich heart full of life and living forever. Friends, I have to ask you, is your heart breaking this Easter Sunday? Is your church's heart breaking this Easter Sunday? The Bible said that David was a man after God's own heart. A man with a heart that beats for the least, the last, and the lost. Do you have a heart that beats after God's own heart? Is your heart beating for the lost and the marginalized, the sick and the suffering, the poor, the sick, and the fearful? Are you alive and functioning with a broken heart that's filled with love? Or not? Friends, I want to close this Easter message with the earliest written prayer in the Jewish Christian tradition. It's the priestly benediction found in Numbers 6, and you have heard it a bunch. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you peace. That's the traditional priestly benediction. But this morning I'd like to re-offer that to you in a form altered by Easter, with all due apologies to the writer of the prayer in the book of Numbers. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you peace. And a beat skipping, blue jean wearing, laughing till you cry, rock rolling, broken heart that's overflowing with love and a determination to change the world. Because with the help of the resurrected Son of the living God, you can. Amen.